Sometimes in life's deepest pain, your purpose is born. Hello and welcome to the Unashamedly You podcast, a space to enlighten, encourage, and empower you to go out and unashamedly be who God is calling you to be. I am your host, Jamie Herndon. I pray you hear less of me and more of Him as you listen to today's episode. Let's grow together. So before we dive into today's podcast, I have an exciting offer for all of my amazing listeners. The Green Forest Lady on Instagram is offering you guys a 20% off code. She has handcrafted organic herbal products, and she sent me some personally for my rosacea, and I literally could have cried. You guys, the difference in my skin was night and day using her cocoa cleanser. So I'm really excited about being able to offer you guys such a generous code. It is for 20% off. No minimums, can be used as many times as you would like. And she did no expiration. So if you're listening to this and it's been a little bit of time, it's perfectly fine. You still can do it. Go to the Green Forest Lady on Instagram to place your order and to get to her site, and use the code JAMIE20 for 20% off. JAMIE20 for 20% off. Hello, podcast listeners. I am so excited that you are here in this space with me today. And we have a guest, one of my best friends. I am so excited for you guys to hear her story. I know that this is the end of 2022. We have one podcast left after this to wrap up our season of podcasts for 2022, which seems so crazy that this year is actually coming to an end. But one of the biggest questions that I've gotten so many times since starting Unashamedly You and before Unashamedly You, which is one of the reasons that I even went into starting it, was, what is my purpose? How do I know I'm living out my purpose? How do I know I'm living out my God-given calling? It's something that I want to, it's something I want to make sure that I'm doing. It's something that I want to make sure that I am living out. I do not want to miss that. I don't want to miss God's purpose and calling. A lot of times I'll give the answer of, sometimes you are being asked to do something and it seems small, it seems insignificant, but that's the start. That is a start of a purpose that God is calling you to and something He's wanting you to do, and things grow from there. I think a lot of times we want to be at the top of the mountain before we actually start climbing. And before we can even get to the top, we want to see that part. We don't want to see just the first step. We don't want to see at the beginning. So we look at things and we think that it's going to be so much bigger and there's going to be so much more. We want to know what God's purpose is, what His calling is, and what He wants from us. But so many times we don't always want to start with just that small thing because it seems insignificant, or He gives us something to do that it seems like we're not worthy of, or we run from that because we know the greater picture of it. We know what He really wants from us and what He's asking of us. And we don't want to do it because we're scared of it. There's reasons why. Sometimes God also has to bring us to our knees to let us find our purpose and our calling. He tells us our purpose and our calling, but He has to bring us to our knees to get us to go after it and to do those things. So I have someone on our podcast today that she's had a lot of come to your knees situations, per se, where God has said, hey, this is what I want you to do. This is your calling. This is what I'm calling you to. And maybe not always readily answered. But I think that you guys are going to learn so much from listening to her story of how the things that she went through to get to that purpose and to find that, even if sometimes it took some pain. So Tiffany Jackson, most of you guys know either her or you definitely know her family. I mean, she essentially has famous family, especially in the apostolic realm. Her brother's Brother Wesley Jackson, and then her cousin is Reverend Taylor Fish. So she's got all the famous people all the way around her here. But Tiffany, I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on here and to talk about this. I know that a lot of your story is very personal. And I'm thankful that you agreed to hop on here with me.
I'm honored to be on here, Jamie. I'm very proud of you. Thank you for asking.
Like I said, a lot of people want to find their purpose and their calling, but what if this comes from a situation of pain, hurt, or even embarrassment where you have to start going after something, maybe after you're embarrassed of something and picking yourself up. And Tiffany, I'm so proud of you because you have done that. You have fallen and you've gotten back up and you've went through things and you've allowed it yourself to grow through those situations and not giving up just completely, just instead picking yourself up and doing the right thing each time and getting closer and closer to those steps that God is calling you towards. And I'm so proud of you for that. So I want you to talk to us a little bit about if your calling and purpose comes in a situation from pain, hurt, or even embarrassment, either way.
I'm going to be very transparent. I guess this is the first time that I've ever really done this, but I would say that, growing up, like you said, I did, I went through a lot of pain. As a child, I watched my mom and dad, struggle through ministry. Looking back, I realized that they were not following the will of God for their life. And in doing that, they kind of drug our family, my brothers and myself, through a lot of different situations that really, I guess you would say, wasn't the will of God for any of us. And we ended up with a lot of scars. My parents separated when I was probably 15. Previous to doing that, my mom battled addiction, and it was just a bad deal, a bad time for us. We did have a happy family, but there was a lot of trouble in our home. So I would say my dad took a church in Colorado when I was probably 12 years old. And that's when things really began to just, unravel for us. We were away from everybody. We were dealing with things in our home. My dad, looking back, as I said, he was out of the will of God. So, of course, everything was falling to pieces. But it was at that time of my life, I kind of realized, I really didn't realize why everything was happening. Looking back from where I am today, I realized that God was preparing me for some things that I had to deal with later on in life. So, like I said, they divorced when I was 7. We had moved back to Texas. My parents split up, and I was just we were just lost. We were kids that didn't have parents, though we had parents. They weren't present. We was all over, live in different places, anybody that would let us, friends, raising friends, and it was kind of at that point that I knew there was something more for my life. I didn't know what it was, but I knew what I was dealing with wasn't it. So, we were just kind of everywhere. I think it was in 2010, I was actually there in Little Rock. Like I said, I'm going to be very transparent for a moment. And I found myself in a lot of trouble. And I ended up in the Pulaski County Jail there. I was there for a little over 7 months. And inside there, that's when God really began to deal with me. He got my attention because I would look around and I realized, God, this is not where I'm supposed to be. Is this what it had to take to get my attention? But it did. I'm very hard-headed. So I've had to learn a lot of hard lessons in life. And so, just looking around, and the people in there, I knew I was different. I knew I didn't belong there. And, everybody in there liked me. I talked to everybody, but they would call me TD Jacks instead of TD Jakes. My middle name's Danielle. They would call me TD Jacks because I didn't know what else to do in there. That was a foreign place to me, besides just read my Bible. But different people would come to me, and we would just do, I actually did Bible studies in there. And that's when I realized, God, this is not for me. And I prayed, if you'll just let me out of here. I was backslid at the time. I had been for about 10 or 11 years. I said, God, if you'll just let me out of here, I'll go back to church and I'll do your will, whatever it was. Kind of, I guess, got jailhouse religion in there. So I got out, and then I did go back to church for a couple services. And I would say it was probably about 2 months after I got out, I was back to doing the exact same things that I was before I landed in there. And my life was just taking another, downhill spiral at a rapid pace. And there was a Mid-America Youth Conference going on 2010. And Brother Tony Spell's name was on the sign when I passed it. And growing up, they were some very friends of ours. They were, there for us when Mom and Dad split up and all of that. And I was wondering if his wife was in town, Sister Shay Spell. And so, like I said, I hadn't been to church and been doing it in quite a while. But I got a hold of her. I reached out to some of her family. I had not seen her in probably 8 or 9 years. And I reached out to her and was able to connect with her. And I promised her I would go to church. And I'll never forget when I walked in that youth service that night at Mid-America, Brother Tony Spell was preaching a current location. And I really started to just examine my life. I didn't tell nobody else that, but I was thinking, God, the location I'm at is not where I need to be. It's not the will of God for my life. It's not where you want me to be. But I was still just steady, just trying to, do things my way. And they were not working. And I remember I was going to school at the time, Pulaski Tech, and I got a text message on my phone, and it was Sister Spell. And she said, my husband wants you to meet us at Starbucks this afternoon. And I said, well, I'm at school, when I get off, I'll come. I got off of school. I went home. I put on a dress and I went and met him at Starbucks. And I told my sister-in-law, Jacqueline, for some reason, I felt like, I said, he's going to ask me to go back to Baton Rouge. And so I went and met him, and we were having coffee and stuff, and we're just making small talk. I mean, I haven't seen him in years, asking about family. And I remember him looking me in the face and saying, Tiffany, what is keeping you here in Little Rock? I said, well, what I mean, Wesley lives here. He said, oh, Wesley's evangelizing full time right now. He said, what is keeping you here in Little Rock? I said, well, really nothing. There was nothing there. You know what I mean? I had friends, but they tried to help me. People in the church had tried to help me. I was just in a bad spot. And so he said, what if I told you that God spoke to me last night and told me that if you'll come back to where you left off, he will restore your life? And Baton Rouge was actually the very place that I was when I backslid and decided that, I was through with church. I was embarrassed for what my parents had done. I was just going to, go out and do things my own way. And he was a little surprised. Everybody was surprised. My dad was surprised. My brother was surprised. I told him yes. I said, well, I finished school in May. I'll move down there in June. So June 1st, I went to Baton Rouge. And I remember, going up to their house. Looking back, I'm ashamed, but I was so messed up. My life was in pieces. I was so, strung out. I was just a mess. I was a wreck. But they took a chance. And I remember going into their home. They took me into their home, and they ended up putting a little room there at the church and kind of, detoxing me. I had to be, get back to my right mind. I remember going through that. It was a terrible time, just trying to get clean, get off all that. But I had made up in my mind, God, if you'll help me, I want to live for you. It was at that point I knew, something's got to give. Just a lot of things had happened. My best friend had been murdered. I was just in a mess. And I remember walking through the back doors of the church thinking, God, I have nothing else to lose. I've lost everything. I lost my home while I was in jail, lost my dignity, been embarrassed, made the front page of the paper. I was in a bad spot, and I was just like, God, if you don't help me, I said, I don't know what else to do. That was all I had left was God. He'll bring you to a place, you'll realize, when you come to that place, he's all you need. So I walked in the back doors of that church and I said, God, if you'll help me, I promise that I'll live for you. And I remember going in there, and I didn't even sit down. I went straight to the altar, and Sister Spell, she came down and she started praying for me. And that night, God touched me. And I just started working around the church there, and I got involved with outreach. And that's really, I guess, when I realized I knew I had a purpose, and I knew, God had something for me, but I really never recognized what it was. But I started working with people in bus ministry, and I just realized I had a passion for people. And that became everything I did. I didn't miss Saturdays. If I was out of town on vacation, I made sure that I was back. It just became something I loved. I became the outreach director there and just got really involved and started working with people. And I see my life change drastically. I went from staying in a church office to then a little travel trailer, and then someone in the church gave me a trailer, and God was just really working in my life. And I remember it was probably 2013. My dad passed away. He had a terrible motorcycle accident, and I got real depressed. And I remember, just kind of letting off the things that I'd been doing. I tried to seclude myself, stay away from people. I started pushing away the people that I loved, and I found myself spiraling right back down where I was. From there, it was a hard couple of years. And then, I got back on track and was doing good. I moved to Diggins. My brother had taken a church there. I moved to Diggins, Missouri. I was doing really well there, got involved again with outreach. God's just started doing a lot of things with my life, gave me a great job. It was going good as long as I was doing what I knew God's plan for my life. A few years later, God saw fit to move my brother and our family, and we took the church here in Jeanerette. Once again, it was a change. Things were different. I had to transition in jobs and everything like that. And I remember, I started backing off. I know my brother had told me, he said, Tiffany, it's time for you to start doing outreach and getting involved. And we did. And we had bus kids coming, and just a lot of things just started happening in my own life. What really happened is I quit praying like I should. And when I did, again, things started to just kind of unravel for me. And I remember I had a terrible wreck, and it should have taken my life. It didn't. It broke my jaw, cut a piece of my ear off. Once again, it was because I was running from the purpose that I knew God had called me to do. And in my mind, all of these times, every time something like that happened, I knew it was because I was running from what I was supposed to be doing. Got back on track, was doing really well, and I got a good job. God gave me a really good job working for the government doing federal disaster assistance. And in 2019, my little brother, he was just at a terrible place in his life. And I was at a place, God had blessed me. I was at a place in my life that I could, try to help him. I'd reached out to him. He had lost his family. He was in a bad place. God was dealing with him again. I believe, I don't know, but I believe he had a calling on his life and that he was running from it as well. And God had to take him through some very dark places to get his attention. I remember when I picked him up, he finally called me one day. I'd been trying to get him I said, just let us help you. We want to help you. And he wouldn't have anything to do with it. And I remember, I'll never forget the call. One day I was in Austin and he called me and he said, Tiffany, he said, I'm so tired. He said, I'm tired of camping out. He said, come get me. He said, I'll live for God. And I'll never forget when I pulled up to get my brother. It was at their old house in Warren, and he was living in a shed with no doors, with like a mattress to a baby bed on the ground with a campfire. And that's how he was living. I was thinking, God, but everything he owned was in a backpack when he slung it in the back of my car. And he had a pair of jeans and some boots that my Aunt Jan had given him to his name. And so we came down here. He started doing good, got in church. He had lost his children at this time. They were with their mother. She was really messed up, strung out. His life was a wreck. We started helping them. I think I got so focused on that again, I lost sight of what God was calling me to do. It's trying to help them. March 13th of this year, most of you know the story. His children come home from church on a Sunday night. They found him in his bathroom floor. He had overdosed on fentanyl. And I'll never forget, I had been sick that Sunday morning. Bishop Holmes was actually here preaching at our church, and I had been sick with a stomach virus. And I remember calling or texting my brother, Brother Jackson. I was telling him something. And he said, Tiffany, can you call me? And I called him, and he said, Kyle's dead. I'll never forget that call. That was one of the hardest things in my life. I lost my dad in 2013, and then I lost my mom in 2017. But I could honestly say none of it affected me like losing my little brother. And I got there, and the coroner and everybody was there, the police, there was ambulance, all that was there. And I remember them saying, you can't go in there. And I said, I have to go in there. That's my brother. I'm his sister. That's my brother. I'm going in there. They were trying to, get me to stay back. And whatever the chief of police, he let me in there. He said, that's the sister. And I'll never forget walking in, and Brother Jackson was standing in his living room, and I went to his bedroom door and just looked across through his bathroom. And he was on his hands and knees with his head to the ground, propped up on his Bible. And I just stood and I stared. And then I turned around, Brother Jackson hugged me, but I'll never forget leaving his house that night. All the way home, I cried. And I said, God, whatever it is that you want from me, I'm willing. And I went through some dark days after that. It was, a bad time in my life. And I went up to Little Rock to stay with you. It was a rough time in my life. But even there, those days at your house, I would tell you and write and stuff. I knew there was something different for my life. I knew what it was, but I knew how I had been running and running and running. But in my own mind, I was thinking, okay, God, I know he self-inflicted Kyle, but God, is this what it's going to take to get my attention? And it did. It really did. It was at that point going forward. I remember April the 13th. It was actually my nephew's birthday. I was sitting in the mezzanine in Little Rock Church, and I was watching the I Am, and just sitting there after the play. I was just sitting there, and I was thinking to myself, God, this is it. I'm going home. I'm going to do what you want me to do. And from that point forward, I just started, working on things.
Yes, I remember you coming to Little Rock and being so devastated because I knew you had done so good, and to see your life back where it was, I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't ready to see all of that. Also knowing and seeing at the same time, like you getting back up again. And I think that a lot of times, one, you had said, you were embarrassed, you were ashamed, and the things that you had went through and the things with your parents. So many people, I've done the same thing as far as went through embarrassment with parents. And then you think, I can never be used because of what they've done and how they ran and how they lived. And then God keeps calling you and you're still miserable because you're not answering that call. And then I've watched you, God, set you down, like you said. You went to jail and he showed you exactly what you're supposed to be doing. He's put you in the middle of witnessing to people that need him, spiraling back down again. But the biggest thing is watching you get up every single time, even after losing Kyle, which, like you said, is the hardest trial you've ever been through. Most people spiral out of control further. You allow every single time that God brings you to your knees, you listen to that purpose and that calling. Every time you tell God, like, look, like, don't be done with me. I'm ready. I'm going to do more. I'm going to be there. I'm going to answer the call. What if someone is at that place right now where they are, maybe they're embarrassed for their past, or maybe they're embarrassed from family members, or, so many things can cause us to be embarrassed of our calling or not answer that call because of the thoughts and the baggage that we feel like we have. What is something that you would tell someone that feels that calling, feels that purpose, but they also feel that shame?
I would say that you just have to make a determination. You have to get back up and just put one foot in front of the other and listen to that voice. Because like I said, I had to learn the hard way because I'm very hard headed. But as long as you keep running from it, it'll never stop following you. It'll never stop. I heard my brother once say, Tiffany, I know the Bible says God makes his mercy new every day. He said that's one of the most encouraging scriptures in all of the Bible, but it's also one of the most dangerous because God's mercy never stops reaching. And as long as you have a calling on your life, it's without repentance. And God will chase you down to a place that you are all he has, to where you have to listen. So I would say that if you're in a place where you just feel like, you've lost everything, rock bottom, just, make it a foundation to rebuild on. You will live the things down that you've done, with people in your mind. You may replay it over and over, but there's things that I've been through in my life that seem so huge to me. Like even like when I said I made the front page of the paper in Little Rock, people don't even remember that. You will live it down. You just have to get up. Don't keep repeating the same thing over and over, but get up and just put your mind to it. And all you can do is one day at a time, just the small things.
I love that. So encouraging and so true about the mercies new every morning. I've never heard that before. That's so good. And yes, I do not remember that part about you being at the front page of the newspaper, and you've mentioned it to me several times, and I don't know why I can't remember that. I guess there's been
Thank you.
there's been too many new things to remember. So something else that I wanted to talk to you about. You talked about picking yourself up after you lost your brother. You sent me something that you've recently enrolled in and that are doing and answering God's calling for your life right now. And I'm so excited about it. Tell us a little bit about that.
I enrolled in the Life in Focus, the ACTS, the Alcohol and Chemical Treatment Program, drug education. And I was actually court ordered to take it several times there in North Little Rock. I went through it with Brother Mike Rankin and Sister Tracy Komatic and also Sister Sharon Blakely. And they made a huge impact on my life. And I've always remember, just thinking like it was such an awesome class. And a lot of people, talked to me about doing it. And I just kept running from it. I knew it was something I wanted to do. I've always wanted to do it. Since I took those classes, they made such an impact on me. I just kept running from it. And recently I was on a job in Florida and I went to see some friends, Brother and Sister Parker. They pastor there, a great little church in Bradenton, Florida. And I was just sitting there talking to her, just about different things in my life. She knows a lot of my story. And she's like, Tiffany, you need to do this. You need to get enrolled. She said, your testimony could help so many people. You have the experience. You have I know that side of life. I wish I didn't, but for some reason, God brought me through all of that for a reason, for a purpose. And she said, you need to enroll in this class to become an instructor. So I did. I said I would. She sent me this stuff and I actually did. I went home and I enrolled and I started taking the classes and I went through all of the material. I did my application to get certified. And last week I received my certification to be an instructor and my badge and everything where I can go. You can actually go into the prisons and the jails and teach the inmates. And also, judges can court order the classes to be held at your church or your local assembly that it'll help them with their probation and things like that. So it's just a great outreach tool. And it's something that I know that I've been supposed to be doing, even if it wasn't in, exactly how it was. I knew this is what I'm supposed to be doing, is outreaching and helping the lost.
Wow. I am so proud of you for that. That is such an amazing story, but it's crazy how, so you started, like you said, in 2010, God sat you down in a jail with those people and you didn't listen. And then every single time that God has reached for you, he reached for you, you listened to the call and you went to the spells and helped with outreach. And then you went, each church that you've moved, you've helped with outreach. And so it's like every single time God's saying, here's what I want you to do. Here's what I have for you. And now you are certified and can go in these jails and all those things. So there is a purpose in the middle of pain. And even though a lot of times we see pain or we see embarrassment or we see a past and we don't want to always go for it. We allow those things to hold us back because that's what the enemy wants. He wants to get in our minds and to get us focused on all the wrong things or all the hurtful things that we have in our lives. And he gets us so focused on that he can get us distracted from exactly what God wants us to do and what God is trying to tell us. This is what I have for you. This is why you went through this. There's a reason. There's a purpose in your pain. God never allows us to go through anything that he can't turn into a testimony. Every single thing that we go through, God can turn it into a testimony for his glory and his honor. As terrible as it feels, all the things that you have been through yourself, and even with losing your brother, like that doesn't seem like that could ever bring God glory. But God can turn anything into a testimony for him whenever we allow him to do that. And that's exactly what you are doing with enrolling in this program, is allowing God to turn that into a testimony, that pain into a purpose. And I'm so proud of you for letting God do that in your life and through your life. Thank you for being so transparent on here and for sharing this. I know that it is going to help so many people, even people, like I said, your testimony may not be to Tiffany's degree. It may be something that you've been through. It may be something that just maybe we all have things that we're embarrassed of in life, or we all have pain that we've had to go through in life. And just realizing that, hey, God's mercies, they are new every morning. He is going to help you through every situation. And he is able to turn your pain into a purpose and a testimony for his glory and his honor. Thank you so much for being so transparent on here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm excited for what God has in store for my future, and I'm excited for what He's doing in your future. I love you very much.
I love you too, Tiffany. Thank you so much. If you have enjoyed this podcast, share it to your social media for others to see. Leave us a review and subscribe so that you get the notification every Friday when our new episode releases. And don't forget, you can now join our Unashamedly You community to get the kind of support and encouragement like this every single day. Go to unashamedlyyou.com to join.